Hi, hola. Welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I'm the Humble Apprentice. I'm your Friday host. This is season 13, week 2. And this week's topic is the history of witchcraft. So for me, it was interesting to research the history of magic in Mexico and the different tribes in Mexico, how they communicated with their deities and how they lived in union with the land. I think in order to talk about the way that I practice, it's interesting to see the different influences from the different centuries of reigns that have come and gone, but how each one kind of left a flavor or an essence in the way that the next generation or the next tribe practiced. To begin with, the most, or the first of the tribes that left an imprint on the society or evidence of their existence were the Olmec. And the Olmec were important because they left a lot of artwork, and also their gods kind of were the basis of a lot of the spirituality that came afterwards, even though it was transformed into the deities that the new tribes worshipped. So after the Olmec, there was the Zapotecs or Zapotecas, and then that takes us into the pre-classic Maya. And then there was a tribe that came and started fighting with the Zapotec, and those were the Mixtec. And then we go into the classic or golden Maya era, which means that the Maya were at the peak of their society. That was between 250 and 900 AD. One of the biggest cities was Calakmul, or the Snake Kingdom, and they were in power from 500 AD to 900 AD. And it was huge. It was massive. It was like 500,000 people in the city itself. The metropolitan area was 200,000 people approximately, and the kingdom, the entire kingdom, was 1.5 to 1.75 million people. And around it was, to the south was Tikal, which was they kind of struggled for supremacy. Tikal wasn't as large a unit, but they were spread out, and they were very populous also, but they were not in one central area like Calakmul. And that's also when Chichen Itza was built, and they were in conflict with the Koba. They were rivals. And to the west was the Toltec. So this was all in the classical period. So the Toltec were a warring tribe. They did fight, but they were a society built around religious war. So they had a permanent army with different warrior castes, and they were highly trained, and they conquered most of central and northern Mexico, or Mesoamerica, because it wasn't just Mexico. It was Central and South America too. And they, at the height of their power, they also conquered the northern Yucatan Peninsula, Chichen Itza, Uxmal, and Coba. And that lasted for 70 years. And their city, their capital, was Tula. Then came the Mexica, and that was after the Toltec lost power. And I think a lot of the spiritual practices, or the spirituality that I grew up with, came from the influence, came from the Toltec, because it was pretty much stripped away when the conquistadors and the Catholic priests came to the New World. But the foundation and the belief system was still there. So it was kind of replaced by Catholicism and the practices and the praying to the Christian gods, or God. But for the Toltec, life revolved around spirituality. The whole reason they conquered was to be able to give to their deities. In a lot of the stories of their interactions with their spirit guides and deities, the greatest gift that can be given, either from the deity to us or from us to the deity, was a gift of the life force, which was in the form of our blood. So that's where the whole sacrifice and bloodletting came to be. And it is a form of blood magic, but like I said, it wasn't defined as a thing, because there wasn't secular and non-secular. Yes, there was the spiritual leaders, and there was the divine rulers, and then there was a common people, but the whole of society revolved around, from my understanding, living to commune peacefully with their guides, their deities. So in one of the creation stories, the men and women were given life force by Quetzalcoatl giving of his life force, or giving life, blood, his own blood, to us to create humans, not in his image, but rather to give us the energy to come into being. And so the society was that we needed to also give of our life force to maintain the connection and give the gods the energy to exist. So therefore there were bloodletting ceremonies and sacrifice. So magic and spirituality were an integral part of the society. There couldn't be life without exchange. What I think a lot of the declines in the societies were that it happened when the ruling class or the kings lost the connection with the people and abused their power. And since the people were very much about balance and equal exchange, and they were willing to sacrifice as long as the sacrifice made sense, as long as it wasn't abused or being used for the personal power of the ruler. Was to exalt the deities and to give back. So they lived in an energy of abundance. There was bartering amongst all the tribes, exchange of goods, but there was no idea of property and belongings, like there was a bountiful earth that gave, and we gave back to the earth. And the idea of hoarding was not something that existed, because there was always more. And I know from my experience, my great-grandmother would always give and offer any guests that came to visit food and drink, and if they needed clothes, whatever they needed. And if somebody said, oh, I like this, they would give it to them, because you don't feel like you lose something. You feel like you're sharing it with somebody, and you always know that you have more. When you live in abundance, there is no fear of scarcity. So if somebody came, they knew that they would bring whatever they could, and in exchange there was an equal balance. And if you ever went to visit somebody, they would also offer whatever they had to share the gifts and the bounties that were given freely from the gods. So the idea of gold as property was not, or silver or anything. It was beautiful. It was admired and used, but it wasn't given the power that it has in the European society, because as the native people saw it, it wasn't something that belonged to us. It came from the gods, and it went go back to the gods. So it was something that was just seen as energy moving and coming to you, and then going back to give energy back to the beings that created it. There was a lot of energy that was put into the creation of spiritual locations, and there was a natural connection to the land that allowed the people to feel their places of power and treat them as such. So a lot of places where water flowed were seen as life-giving, because they gave the people the ability to live in that area, to exist. The idea of human sacrifice is foreign to us, but I think that what happened is that it didn't happen always, and it happened under dire circumstances. When there was loss of water in droughts, food and famines, and it was also different from tribe to tribe, and there's a different archaeological evidence of different places throughout Mesoamerica where there is evidence of skeletal remains of locations where there was human sacrifice. I think that there was a tradition where the human that was going to be giving their life force, there were the tribes that ruled with humility and for the best of the tribe. And in those societies, the person that was going to be sacrificed went willingly. And that's what the stories, that's what the gods showed in the original stories of the creation of the cosmos, where the gods requested that two gods created or did sacrifice themselves, one to create the sun and one to bring forth the moon. And it was very important to them that it be willing. So as the story goes, the one that had spoken up, and he was supposed to be the sun god, when it came the day after the 4 days of merriment and pre-sacrifice gift giving and exchange and happy and celebratory party going celebratory exchanges to venerate the gods that were going to give their essence to bring life and light to the earth, the one that was going to be the sun god decided, well, I'm not sure. So they backed off and they wouldn't do it. And everybody was like, come on. All the other gods were like, hey, you said you were going to do it. Now jump into the divine fire that will bring forth, give the energy to the sun so that the sun goes into the sky. Well, all of the gods got frustrated and said, well, who will sacrifice themselves since this guy isn't going to do it? And the second god that was going to become the moon walked up to the divine fire, divine flame, and without hesitation and with acceptance walked into the flames and was consumed by the fire without a whimper or a tear. So in seeing the bravery of who now became the sun, the original god that had offered himself as a sacrifice, felt the courage, walked into the flame, and became the moon. So from that, we can understand and we can see that sacrifice was important, but it wasn't just sacrifice. It had to be willing, and it had to be without resentment. And I think that's where the difference in the different tribes, and that's where the discord and the resentment from the people happened, was that the tribes that were able to commune and not force the sacrifice on and not take from the people, those were the tribes that flourished in peace without strife, internal dissonance, between the ruling and the common people. Because what happened to the Aztecs is that when they are known to be the very violent, and they sacrificed a lot of humans to their gods, but they did so by taking not just from their people, but from the tribes that they conquered, and they sacrificed them without their consent. So it was not a partnership, and it was not honorable. So when the conquistadors came and Cortez came, they were able to sow more discord and bring a very huge empire into discord and enslave the population. Also, one of the biggest losses is the fact that they destroyed a lot of the spiritual records and artifacts of the Mayan and the Toltec and any other spiritual practices that they didn't think fit with the Catholic Church and the beliefs of the Vatican. Spirituality and magic is interwoven into the life of ancient native Mexican tribes. And I think a lot of it still lives on today. I mean, if we come back to the present, there are the curanderos, and the sobadores, which are basically curanderas are healers, and they tend to be spiritual healers, and curanderos as well are spiritual healers. And then we have the bone setters, which are the sobadores, or what sobar is to rub. So I happened to twist my ankle when I was very young, and it was like this big, huge grapefruit. And there was somebody at the time in LA who was a bone setter, and they brought him over to the house, and he asked me if it was okay, and I said yes. And then he told me it was gonna get hot, and it might be a little tender and painful, but not much. So he used a massage wand and heat up the muscle area for a few minutes until the muscle was pliable. And with a few swift movements and massage, he was able to set back the bones to where they were supposed to be, and the muscles and the tendons. And the swelling went down 2 days later, and I was running around a week later on my foot. So I can attest to their experience, and it was I don't know, like the energy of a hush hush. You know, we work with these people, but they're different. They don't follow what we follow. You know, they follow the old ways. In every town that I went to in Mexico, there was the curandera or curandero, you know, the healers, the natural healers that use the herbs and blew the smoke and looked at you and could see the energy around you. So in my family, whenever they discussed it, it was like, you know, we know what they do, but we won't really talk about what they do. We only use them when we need them. But they were on the outskirts of what were most of the quote unquote like regular people, you know. And it was just a feeling. Most of these things weren't stated out loud, but when people spoke about certain people, they were just like in hushed voices. And I think a lot of it had to do with maybe even protecting them from when they were, you know, not supposed to be practicing the traditional or native ways of healing. There must have been persecutions, you know. I know after the Spanish instituted their own religion and laws onto a people that already had societies, you know. So for me, knowing all that, it makes me very proud and very curious to learn more. of the practices of the Toltec, to understand the Mayan culture, because they sort of grew from one another. This has been fantastic, very educational, very inspiring, empowering, and I can't wait to learn more. There are so many deities that they revered, that they worked with, that they embodied as well. And unlike some other spiritual practices, these deities were very approachable, because they were not infallible. They weren't perfect. They very much needed us as much as we needed them to give them life in exchange. And they gave us wisdom and experience and knowledge and understanding of the cycles of life. And yeah, they're such a great many pantheons. I don't know if deities, but spiritual beings that took various forms, from animals to mixed beings. I hope that this wasn't too convoluted, but like I said, a lot of the different tribes kind of overlap their history, and sorting everything in a very linear way is very difficult for me. So I kind of tried to get the feeling of how spiritual practices grew through the ages and influenced the people, and ultimately how they're still influencing us, even though a lot of Mexican culture is very Christian oriented, but there are still very small and secluded areas where the population, through oral history, is still practicing the original, if not exactly the same, but traditions of the native tribes of Mexico. So I would be very honored if I could spend some time living in some of these places and learning from the sobadores and the curanderas. I would be very honored. It's one of my checklists, right? So thank you very much for listening. If you're still listening, I am very happy to bring this information and talk about it and mix it in with a little bit of my experience. I also want to add a clip from when I went to pay my respects to George Floyd. It was very moving, and I think it's important that we acknowledge what's going on around us at this moment of time. This is a year of a lot of change. People should not be afraid to go and buy takeout or dinner. You know, it doesn't seem like it's that time and place for those things to happen anymore. And the fact that they are still happening, we need to not ignore, collectively ensure that that is no longer a practice that continues. We can only rise together. Please enjoy. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend. Stay strong, and blessed be.